All right, everybody, we're going to go ahead and reconvene with the meeting. At this time, I'll ask our first guest speaker, a candidate for Lieutenant Governor, Hal Weatherman, to come up.
No, I'm not going to give you a speech. I am Hal Weatherman, running for Lieutenant Governor. Some of y'all I know from my previous work around the state. And but by way of introduction, I'm 53 years old, married. I've been married for 20 years, like in a week and a half. So yeah, thank you. Been surprised we made it this long. Yeah, no, we're very happy and have 3 kids, ages 18 boy, 16 boy, 13-year-old girl. We live in Wake Forest, so I'm just not that far from you, down the road. And some of y'all remember I used to work for your previous Lieutenant Governor, Dan Forrest, was his chief of staff, and was with him for 10 years, because people forget we actually campaigned for Lieutenant Governor the first time for almost 2 years before the race even started. And I'll have a side note on that. That was the most fulfilling campaign I have ever run in my life. I've run 14 campaigns in my life, but that was the most fulfilling ever, because people forget, other than with one exception, Dan was only the second Republican elected Lieutenant Governor since 1896. And he redefined what it takes to win the down ballot as a Republican, because we basically broke a 145-year stranglehold on the down ballot races, and we did it by unbelievable travel. No other way. We made the decision early on in that race that if we run a traditional campaign, we lose. Everybody before us lost. Why would it be any different? And so redefined the race, got on the road, did 300,000 miles alone in that campaign. Went to all 100 counties multiple times. At the end of that campaign, we did because you lose track of where all you've gone. I did a report just by pulling our calendar up. What county did we go to the most during that entire campaign? And it would shock you where we went the most. We went to Anson County, North Carolina, which is east, if you know Anson, it's east of Charlotte, about 2 counties over, very small, Democrat county. We went there 17 times in that campaign, and we lost the county. You believe that? In a race that we won and we lost the county. I'm like, what more does it take? But to be honest, though, that was the style. And you'll see elements of that in my campaign as well. And then prior to working for Dan, I had the honor and privilege to work 18 years for his mother, and his mother has a different last name than him, but her name is Sue Myrick, and she's retired now, but she was the first female mayor of the city of Charlotte, and then she served with distinction in Congress for 18 years. She was very conservative. She was chair of the Republican Study Committee. If you know anything about DC, that's the jumping off point for all conservative leaders. And just an amazing journey with her for 18 years. But I've got it in my heart now to run for Lieutenant Governor myself. We've been in this race since January. I was one of the first. I don't know if I was the first or not, but I was one of the first to get into the race, and we immediately hit the road. And I was telling some of y'all earlier, as of Friday, as of tomorrow, we will have traversed 99 of the 100 counties so far. So we're right on the cusp of completing a 100 county tour. It's not new to me. I've already traveled all 100 counties. I've already been, multiple times in my career, but I just feel it's important because I think you should know the state. I really do, that you want to lead. I really think that's like job number one. Do you know the state? And so I'm just going to jump around a little bit. The first thing that I like to tell people when I talk about governor and lieutenant governor is, always think about what you're electing when you're electing a lieutenant governor. The first job of a lieutenant governor is actually to be the governor in waiting. And people don't realize that. They overlook that. 5 times in your state history, the governor has died, been removed, or been incapacitated. We have an automatic succession plan in North Carolina. So the lieutenant governor is the governor in waiting. God forbid something happened to the governor ahead of him. And so you have to factor in, can the person have the leadership and the experience? Do they know the state? Can they be the commander-in-chief of the Guard, the Air National Guard, the National Guard on the ground? Can they run 98,000 state employees? Can they have almost unilateral control of state property, which a lot of people don't realize the governor does? There's so many responsibilities there, even though we have a relatively weak governorship in comparison to other states. Still a big responsibility. Lieutenant Governor serves as president of the Senate. He also serves on the State Economic Development Board, Capital Planning Commission, serves as the president of the Energy Policy Council, which is actually a very influential position, a little bit in the weeds, but very influential in terms of being able to influence energy policy. If you don't have a state with good energy, good, reliable, cheap energy, you don't have a state. right? And so there are a lot of things there. When I was with Sue Myrick, I'll share this because it's relevant in today's world. When I was with Sue Myrick and I was her chief of staff in Congress, she served on the Intel Committee. And so you would not know this, but I have a very extensive background in homegrown jihadi-based terrorism movements. That's actually what my expertise was, and I traveled the country and briefed military, law enforcement, media outlets, elected officials on all levels in all states. And this was 15, 16, 17 years ago, on the rise of jihadi-based terrorism movements. I'll share that with you here today because if you're following what's going on our southern border, which I'm sure you are, in connection with what's going on in Israel, then you understand what a precarious world we live in. The southern border has completely collapsed, and we are allowing OTMs other than Mexicans to come across that border that wish us harm. And we are kidding ourselves as a country. We are kidding ourselves as a country if we don't think we're going to have a whole rash wave of homegrown jihadi-based terrorism that's not homegrown at all. We just simply allowed it to walk across our southern border. So I share that now a little bit in my remarks because I want people to know that. Again, when you're electing a governor and a lieutenant governor, do they have the experience necessary to deal with what's probably coming our way? I have certain fundamental beliefs. Again, I don't want to really give you a speech. I'd rather take questions, but my entire campaign, good, bad, or otherwise, whether it's sexy or not, my entire campaign is about self-sufficiency for man and self-sufficiency for our state. That is what I feel called. I was very prayerful in deciding, my wife and I both, in deciding to run for this office. And I've always said, if God gives something, put something on your heart, then he'll give you the words to say it, the provision to do it. But you have to be obedient to it. And so, you know, I'm traveling the state preaching a message of self-sufficiency. When I say self-sufficiency, I mean this. I want our people in North Carolina to know true freedom. I want them to control their own destiny. I want them to be dependent on no one or no one entity other than the good Lord and the work of their hands. And so I want to drive people, for instance, into the trades. I want to drive them into the trades. We can, as a society, no longer keep, and if you have a degree in Egyptian poetry tonight, I apologize in advance for what I'm about to say, but we can't, generation after generation, send our kids to the four-year degree system where they're coming out with degrees in Egyptian poetry, come out $100,000 in debt and can't get a job. This is ridiculous. All the while, there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of jobs around this country, right? HVAC, plumbing, welding, commercial welding, all jobs that involve working with your hands. See, I believe that we as a society have put a stigma on people working with their hands. And I think it's one of the greatest disservices we've ever done to all the generations that have come behind us. So I want to restore what I call the basic dignity of work of all people by driving people to the trades. And least you think I'm talking about just the kids that aren't going to go to college. I'm not. I actually want to drive people who are going to college into the trades as well. I want to do something that's going to be controversial. It shouldn't be, but I promise you it will be. If I get there, I want to create a 2 and 2 degree. I want our kids that are going to a four-year university to make a stop first at the trade school. 2 years in the trades, commercial welding, plumbing, HVAC, whatever it is, and then switch over and graduate from a four-year university where they get a degree in business, graphic design, marketing, all the tools necessary to be an entrepreneur, coupled with a skill set that's going to make them profitable, but ultimately it's going to make them self-sufficient. I really believe in self-sufficiency. I believe that that's what God has put on there and on my heart. And by the way, a lot of times I talk in code. I'll just be honest. I'm running. I'm a believer. I'm talking in a secular world. When I talk about self-sufficiency, I'm also talking about, I believe truly that every person I come in contact with, every group that I come in contact with, that there are people in that room that are struggling, right? As Henry David Thoreau said one time, the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. What does that mean? It means all of us are struggling with something. When I talk about self-sufficiency, hear what I'm saying. I want to help break people free from that which addicts them. I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's sex, drugs, porn, whatever it is in their life. I want them to be self-sufficient. Does that make sense? I want them to be self-sufficient, dependent on no one but God. And the avenue that I kind of drive that through, right, is my message of self-sufficiency, restoring the basic concept of dignity, the dignity of work. God put man on this earth to work. That's what he put. And when I say man, I mean mankind. I mean man and woman. Man and woman, right? God put us on this earth to work. When you're not working, it's when you work. That is where your dignity comes from, your self-respect. That is where your self-sufficiency comes from. And self-sufficiency, by the way, is a real internal peace that God will put on your life as a man or a woman when you are living your life in such a way that you're dependent on no one thing or no one entity other than Him. And when you're in that zone, He'll give you this peace. And that's called self-sufficiency. And what He's saying is you are now living your life in such a way that I can mold you and I can use you in my service. And I have a desire for our people to know that self-sufficient peace. That's what I want. Does that make sense? That's why so self-sufficiency for man. The other side is self-sufficiency for our state. It's the same concept. I want our state to be self-sufficient, and I'm fearful that we're not. And I'm fearful that the day of reckoning is coming in this country. In fact, I'm quite convinced it's going to come. And I don't know what that means. The day of reckoning is going to come in this country. It's going to come, and it could happen very soon. It could be a financial meltdown of epic proportions. I think we all say, okay, yeah, that's possible. It could be COVID on steroids, something that doesn't have a 98.8% survival rate. What happens if we come into contact with something where it's been manipulated in such a way that it takes 1 out of every 10 lives? You see what the government did to us when COVID took place, right? We look back on it now and go, really? How many civil liberties did we give up willfully? By the way, the government never gives back what it takes. I promise you the government never gives back what you willfully give to it. And it's amazing what we, under the guise of security and safety and protection, willfully sacrifice to our government. Does that make sense? I'm scared about the future of this country. I really am. I believe that if your state is not self-sufficient, you're going to be 100% dependent on the federal government. I'm a limited government constitutional Christian. Limited government means I believe in the government at all levels, including the federal government. I do. I believe in that. God put it here. He ordained it. He ordained it for civility and order and peace, right? But once the government hits that limit, let man live free. And that is not what we see today. I actually think one of the number one problems that we have in this country today is our addiction to federal funds. We are not self-sufficient. We are addicted. What are we addicted to? The funds. Why is that problematic? I'll use education as an example. If you don't like CRT or SEL or DEI or all these 3-letter acronyms that are basically putting out ideologies that are meant to divide us, why are we doing it? Follow the money. Watch the drug dealers. Watch the drug dealers on the playground, right? The first round's always for free, right? Because once you're addicted to it, they can lace it with anything they want, and you'll take it with a smile on your face. That's our state. That's every state in the union. We're addicted to federal funds, not realizing that the liberal left has taken over every one of those funding sources and laced it now with all these ideologies, with these 3-letter acronyms, right? So if you don't like CRT, cut the funding. You know who can't cut the funding? A non-self-sufficient state. See, self-sufficiency frees you. Self-sufficiency as an individual frees you from your addictions, right? Self-sufficiency as a state frees you from your addictions. The day of reckoning is coming. And when that day comes, I hate to say it, I truly believe that the number one perpetrator of the ideologies driving us, meant to divide us, are actually being perpetrated by our own federal government. It pains me to say that. And when that day of reckoning comes, you need an equal and opposite force to stand up to it. There is no equal and opposite force to the federal government. But the closest thing to it will be a state governed by a constitutional, conservative governor and lieutenant governor. And I think the day of reckoning is coming. So I hope that makes sense. That's my campaign in a nutshell. Other than that, I do believe in hard work. I do believe in leading by example. You know, traveling the state, going to all 100 counties is not a PR stunt. It's not a PR stunt at all. If it was a PR stunt, we would have completed it 6 months ago. We go county to county. Like tomorrow, I'll meet with economic development officials in 4 different counties. No PR, no publicity, no nothing. People have no clue what we do when we're laying down. I'm preparing to serve the state, but I've got to win the race, but I'm also preparing to serve the state. And so I think that's important. Some of my opponents will ridicule my travel. They'll ridicule the bus that I ride in. I make no apologies for the shirt I wear and the bus that I wear. This is the governor's race. This is the lieutenant governor's race. $44 million race, $1.5 million race. I got to do more with less. I got to do more with less. I'm not waiting for the people to come find me. I'm trying to come to you. I'm going county by county because I have to, because I'm interviewing for the job and you're my potential bosses. And the only way I do it is to come to you and say, this is how hard I'm going to work, right? So don't let anybody ever ridicule you if you're a candidate or you're a future candidate for going out and working for the job and showing people I want your support. I'm not ashamed of that. I want to lead the state. So I'll stop there. I'll take whatever questions you have. if you have any or criticisms or comments or whatever you have.
What's the one county?
So, it's debatable. It's going to wind up being Cherokee, and it's not because Cherokee is the furthest away. It's not. Because we've been to Cherokee. We have been to Cherokee. I've been to Cherokee multiple times. I know. Well, it's because we would have been there 6 months ago.
You want to come January 7th?
Well, we're already going to come. When are we going to be? We're going to be at We the People.
Okay.
So we're already scheduled, and we've already been scheduled out there. It's just what we were scheduled to go to. What we were scheduled to go to got canceled, and so it re-altered our plans, and our schedule has been booked up for 6 months. So it's not like we can just immediately come back. So, but yeah, that's the only one. Yes, sir.
Do you have an opinion on North Carolina joining the right now other 19 states in calling for an Article 5 convention of states to impose term limits on Congress, fiscally restrain the federal government, and propose amendments that would limit the size and scope of the federal government?
Yeah, so if you were to ask me 10 years ago if I believed in an Article 5 convention, I've always believed in it, but would I actually think, should we do that? 10 years ago, I would have said no. I don't think we're ready. I'm like, I don't know. I'm scared of a runaway convention. I'm scared of this. I'm scared of, what could happen. Fast forward 10 years to today, hell yes. Absolutely. What are we waiting on? What are we absolutely? Our forefathers had the wisdom to give us that provision that said, if you ever think that the government has grown too large and too out of control in such a way that it threatens the very nature of the republic itself, then you have this escape mechanism. That's what they put it there for. We're clearly there. Where's our Congress today, by the way? Where's our Congress? What Biden has done to the southern border, by the way, is impeachable. Period. Is impeachable. I'm not a radical. I believe in our president. I believe in order. This is literally an invasion of our country. Where's our Congress? And if they're not going to act on that, then we need a new Congress as well. And so they're never going to give up the power. No one's ever going to willfully give up power. They're not. And so the power should be in the people. The forefathers gave us that convention right to reinstill a limited government. Now, with that said, I don't believe going into an Article 5 convention where it could be debatable on anything. It has to be amazingly limited. And so if you said term limits and scale down the size, nope, I would say you've already gone one too many. Pick one, get them together, install one thing to avoid a potential runaway convention, if that makes sense. I'm not an attorney, but I have looked into some of that over the years.
So the lieutenant governor, you mentioned, is the president of the Senate.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've kind of just heard mentioned around here is the debate of how much influence the lieutenant governor actually has over the legislative process as the president of the Senate. How do you see that? Are you... Well,
the power of the lieutenant governor was basically stripped, as you know, when Jim Gardner became the first Republican lieutenant governor since 1896 and 87. And so they stripped basically all the power of the lieutenant governor away and limited him to board appointment positions. With that said, the position itself, as any position is, in my opinion, is influence-based. Meaning, I was there with Danforth for 8 years, and your phone calls do get returned. You absolutely can influence just about anything. Legislatively, the lieutenant governor, though he's president of the Senate, he's just the presiding officer. The true power is with the president pro tem. In today's world, that would be Berger. Back in the beginning days, that would have been on the Democrat side. His name already escapes me.
Mark Basnight, was it?
Yeah, Basnight. And so, that's where the power is. That power is never going to come back. Now, I'm not advocating this. I'm running for the position with the duties as they are currently prescribed. But if you were asking Hal Weatherman, what is your opinion of what the role of lieutenant governor should be? I'm a realist. I realize that the president pro tem is never, ever going to give up that power, right? I understand that. What I think the proper role of lieutenant governor is, he actually, or she, should be the chief of staff to the governor. That's actually what I believe. I actually think the lieutenant governor should run in tandem with the governor. I actually think they should not run separate. To do that, though, you would have to change the election process of the lieutenant governor to an appointed position, very similar to where once the Republican or Democrat nominee for governor is in place, elected by the people, right, at the primary level, then they turn around and appoint who they want to be the running mate. Why? Because I think that running mate should actually serve as their, quote, chief of staff. So the lieutenant governor, I believe, should be a lieutenant governor / chief of staff to the governor. Why? Because at that point, You don't have to add any more power to the lieutenant governor at all. And you increased his power through the wazoo. Why? Because every room he or she walks into, they know the governor has just walked in. Because you are subservient to the governor at that point. You have no agenda of your own as lieutenant governor. You are actually there to do the governor's business. And I actually think that would be very powerful, and I actually think it would be very fulfilling. There's a reason Jesus sent the apostles out in twos, right? And I think the governor needs a running mate and needs somebody that they can work with and depend on. In the absence of that, this is what happens. And again, I've been there. In fact, I thought Dan Force did something wise when we were elected, and before we were sworn in, we met with every surviving lieutenant governor that was alive, regardless of what party they were from, and got advice from each one of them. And each one of them told us the same thing in their own words, that the legislature is going to see you as the lieutenant governor. And because you have governor in your title, they're going to see you as the executive branch, which the lieutenant governor is a member of the executive branch, right? But the executive branch is going to see president of the Senate in your title, and they're going to think you're a member of the legislature. So the legislature will have nothing to do with you, and the governor's office will have nothing to do with you, and you're going to be an island between two streams on your own. And you know what? This was told to us by every lieutenant governor before us, and they were 100% right. They were 100% right. Not one time did we ever caucus with the Senate. Not one time. We were the president of the Senate, never caucus. We're never invited. We not one time sat down with the governor's cabinet under a Republican governor or a Democrat governor. Not one time. I think that's foolishness. I think it's absolute foolishness. Why? If for no other reason, you are the governor in waiting. God forbid something happened to the governor. And then you have to step up and immediately preside over the state. It's not good leadership. It's not right. So that's how I would address it. But with that said, I'm not hung up on the title. I'm not hung up with the job, the legislative duties, or whatever. Dan Force didn't have the right as lieutenant governor to introduce legislation because lieutenant governors don't have that privilege. Yet we routinely introduced about 30 pieces of legislation and passed almost every one of them every year that we were there. We just have to write the bills ourselves, find a legislator to introduce it for us, and then we champion it with them, and then they pass it. It's a way of sharing the credit, but it's also a way for us to make legislative change, and I would continue that as well. Yeah. Any other questions? I want to be respectful of y'all's time. I don't know what my time limit is. So. Well, listen, appreciate you. Oh, yes, go ahead.
So I know this question here may not be, probably be more of a governor question, not lieutenant governor, but one concern that is on my mind is our universities are receiving funding from not just the federal government, but from other sources.
Yeah.
And some of those may have ties to the CCP and the PRC. Do you have any ideas or plans to maybe try to curb that influence from them?
Yeah,
Because I think
we should absolutely do that.
Because I think part of, like what you said with the federal government, that's part of it, but then you have the other from the communists over there. So.
Oh, listen, virtually every, I'll use, going back to my background with Sue Myrick. Yes, virtually every Middle Eastern studies program in the United States at a university level is funded by Saudi Arabia. And they absolutely influence future American diplomats, their worldview, how they think, how they address problems. Absolutely, you're 100% right. Yes, the answer is just simply yes. And I would not limit it to China. Absolutely, I'm actually very concerned about multiple sources of federal influence of other nations. Right. Anything else? Yes, sir. Yeah.
Just kind of springboarding off that, and correct me if I'm wrong. That's the claim I may be. Probably am. The lieutenant governor also has a voting position on the State Board of Education.
Yep, State Board of Education and State Board of Community Colleges right now. My understanding is the General Assembly just took community colleges away from the incoming lieutenant governor.
Gotcha. So in that regard, you are a vote on that. So you do have some sort of pull as far as which way the state education system either goes economically or curriculum policy, all of that.
Yep.
So, okay.
Yep. 59% of your state budget, 59% goes to education at one level or not. So, I mean, you can't run for statewide office, governor or lieutenant governor, and not be neck deep in education. I will be a voting member if I'm elected to the State Board of Education. I look forward to that. I believe, again, if you really read into what I'm talking about being self-sufficient, I absolutely want to free us from some of the federal funds. I call it breaking the ties that bind. I'm going to break the ties that bind so that we are free to introduce CRTs and a complete anathema to everything that we believe. It should not be allowed to stand. We cannot allow our black babies to be told at birth, you are born a victim and there's nothing you can do about it. We cannot allow our white babies to be told you were born an oppressor and there's nothing you can do about it, and think that this country is going to survive. I mean, think about the civil rights movement, right? Think about, and we did as a society unjustly judge men and women by the color of their skin. We did, and we acknowledge that, and it was wrong. And then here comes the civil rights movement, and we finally evolved as a people, and we changed, and we went from judging you from the color of your skin to the content of your character. Martin Luther King, who, by the way, was a Republican, right? And so we evolved as a nation. Here we are 60 years later, and here comes CRT, right? And DEI and all these other things said, nope, we're going to go back to judging you by the color of your skin. This is overt racism. This is overt racism. Why are we accepting it, right? It's not progress. It's going backwards, right? So yes, I'm a huge proponent of school choice. All three of my children, all three, at one time or another have gone public, private, Christian, charter, and homeschool. In fact, right now I've got one child in a charter school that I helped start 5 years ago. Now we have 1,900 students. And then my other daughter is being homeschooled. But all of my kids have come in and out of any of those systems, and we made that decision every step of the way, and I want you and your family to have that decision too, right? The saddest thing we do as a society is to doom the future success of a child at birth because of the zip code they're born in. That's the saddest thing ever, right? And we have to be honest that some zip codes are better than others. They are. And so we need to give them the chance. Now, in order to do that, you got to change the entire funding model of the school systems, right? And I want to stop funding the systems and start funding the children. And the General Assembly is doing good work on that to progress, to get us to that point where we're in the backpack model. Just simply envision a child here with a backpack. Whatever the school system wants to spend in them, don't write a check to somebody else. Take the money, unzip the backpack, put it in the kid's back, and say, go wherever you want. That's exactly right. And I'm a big proponent of that. But, I want to put God back in the school. I'm very open about what we need to go back to teaching. I want our kids to graduate from school knowing basic financial literacy, the danger or the supremacy of compounded interest and what it does in their life if they start early enough, the dangers of debt, the supremacy of capitalism. I want to celebrate American exceptionalism. By the way, American exceptionalism, to be clear in my words, right, is that there is no moral equivalency of America to any other country. Not because we think we're better than anybody else, it's because we're the only country in the world that says our rights don't come from man. They don't come from man-made entities. They actually come from Creator Lord God. And that's what makes us exceptional. I want to go back to openly teaching that, right? Because if you actually look at what's going on in our world today, a lot of the violence, a lot of the things that's going on, two interesting trends. You read the polls. These younger generations, whatever we're at now, are we at Alpha yet? We're at Generation Z, Generation Alpha, I can't keep up, right? Whatever generations were, the last two generations coming up are the most pro-life, when they poll them, the most pro-life young generations that we've seen in our lifetimes. Interesting. In today's world. They're intuitively coming up valuing life, yet they are the most anxiety, stress-prone, suicide-prone generations we've ever known. Interesting. We have to reinstill hope in people. You have to give people hope to live. And we're not instilling hope in people. They're valuing life, but then they come into life and there's no hope. And there's something about our society that's not right about that. And so again, self-sufficiency for man, self-sufficiency for what I'm really saying is we need to align ourselves to where we're not dependent on any of these outside sources that are basically killing our hope, and go back to where our hope comes from, right? So I hope that makes sense. This is a good question. All right, Greg, yeah.
So I graduate from UNC Wilmington next month.
Congrats. I fully expect to see you on Fox News one day. By the way. Have I told you that?
Really?
I do.
I don't know about Fox.
Well, wherever you want to wind up, but yeah.
Yeah, Newsmax. There you go. So in the secondary education program, I mean, we they're naturally liberal, the students there, but like we're producing, it's like a production mill of more liberal teachers at UNC Wilmington. I mean, I had to read.
I would not limit it just to UNC Wilmington.
Yeah, I mean,
the entire
for sure.
system is. Yeah.
I mean, I had to read a chapter that started off, and I had to teach that chapter to the rest of the class, and it started off with, "Do you think that you can teach a black child and not think that they are less intelligent than the rest of the class, well, you're wrong. And
Right.
I was like, what kind of like racist bull crap is that?
Right.
But that's what we're teaching our future educators.
Sure.
So more so than just keeping CRT out of the curriculum,
Yep.
how do we curtail the future educators from being brainwashed leftists?
But it's a multifaceted thing. The one thing that I would love to see us do is I would like to eliminate tenure. First of all, I'm not a big fan of tenure. Like I don't know of other jobs where once you stay a certain amount of time, then you're guaranteed immunity for the rest of your life to stay there with nothing can happen to you, right? You can't fire them. But if we're gonna keep tenure, then I would like to change the terms for which we grant tenure to people, if that makes sense. So right now, when you have professors, their tenureship, if you call it that, comes from basically their ability to be published in scholarly, if you've ever noticed that, to be published in scholarly publications that none of us have ever read or ever heard of. And they write very esoteric, usually anti-American things, right? And we reward them with a lifetime commitment and job because they do that. I would like to reverse the tenureship and say, instead of giving tenure based on what you publish, I would like to give tenure based on what you create, right? So that the professor is incentivized to create a business, a job, something that's patentable, and that professor gets a cut of it, and the school gets a cut of it, and the students who helped on it get a cut of it. Does that make sense? I would like to go that route. By the way, that's how SAS was created. Y'all know SAS? That's how SAS was created, NC State University, right? That's how they were created, but the state got nothing, right? The students got nothing, right? And I think that's wrong. But yet, if you change the tenure, right, to where that's what it is, the schools will become addicted to that money. They'll be addicted to that money, and they'll start getting rid of these anti-American, anti-capitalists and start putting these free enterprise-driven professors in. Why? Because they're creating revenue for the school. They're creating relevancy to the school. And what are you really doing? You're driving pro-America free enterprise people back into the classroom, and that's what we should do. That's one way I would deal with that, if that makes sense. All right. I'm probably way out of time. Thank y'all for having me. I appreciate you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today, tonight. I've been a judge for 23 years. I am the oldest serving judge. It's hard for me to say that, but I'm the oldest serving judge in our district. Our district is comprised of Johnston, Harnett, and Lee County. I don't recognize anybody in this room. That means I haven't seen you in my courtroom. And secondly, it's because I'm from Lee County. I live in Sanford, North Carolina. I have lived there all my life. I'm married to Kim, been married 37 years. Have 3 children, a son who's 31 years old, besides my other son, Cole, and twin daughters, Meredith and Rebecca. And they have provided me with 2 grandchildren, which I love very much. But as I said, I am in district court. We handle domestic cases, misdemeanor criminal cases. And the exciting thing that's happening in district court now, and Representative White is well aware of this, is we are, our Wake County and Lee County, Harnett County, and Johnston County, the 2 districts who have started using Odyssey. And Odyssey is a program where we are trying to get rid of paper. Prior to Odyssey, we had a court file. If I had a case, it'd give me the court file and I could look through the file, which I would rather do. I'm going to be honest with you, I'm old school. I still like to read a newspaper. So I like to read a file. I like to have that file in my hand, but the state of North Carolina, in their infinite wisdom, wants to get rid of paper. And so they want to save trees. And so we are going to Odyssey. Well, we started in February, and it has been some problems. And as you know, or you may not know, there's been some class action lawsuits because people have been staying in jail longer than they should have, or they've been rearrested for crimes that they've already been arrested for and released on bond. So it's just some issues with Odyssey, and they're trying to work it out. Mecklenburg County is now under that system. And I tell people, basically, to me, we're giving up paper at the cost of being efficient. It takes us longer in court now to do cases. And, you know, I know people, when they go to court, they want to get in and out. And especially in district court, because we are the people's court. We handle the most volume of cases. And people want to get in and out and understand about their time. But Odyssey makes it slower. And like I had civil domestic violence court today in Johnston County, had 26 cases on, which might not sound like a lot, but it took us all day. And I have to make this announcement every time I'm doing that court, is say, I'm sorry, this court is going to take longer than normal because we're under Odyssey. I said, be patient with me. I said, I'm up here. I'm not playing a video game or a computer game. I'm trying to draft orders. And so I'm sure eventually the kinks will be worked out, but in the meantime, the judges suffer and y'all suffer. And so I apologize for that. Another thing I wanted to say, I've already talked to Representative White, but I wanted to thank her so everyone here would know, is that if you've seen the budget, the district court judges, got a hefty pay raise this year. I've been on the bench, as I said, 23 years, and there's always been a disparity, let me say it like this, as between the Supreme Court justices, Court of Appeals justices, and Superior Court judges. There's always been like a 7% difference in pay, 6 or 7% difference in pay. Between Superior Court judges and District Court judges who do the most work, there was probably a 15% difference. And we've always been working to try to get that to a 7% like everybody else. Well, we finally got it done thanks to Representative White and others like her. I thank her, and all the other judges would thank her. I'm one of 11 judges in your district. I'm the only judge from Lee County. I think there's 3 judges from Harnett County currently right now, and then 7 judges from Johnston County. I think this year I do have to run. I will be filing, and I think of the 11, I think 7 or 8 of us will be running. Obviously, it's during the presidential year, governor, lieutenant governor, so we don't get a lot of press, and that's probably the way we like it. I think most judges want to stay low key, and so that's fine with us. But I've enjoyed being a district court judge. I've been doing mostly domestic in Johnston and Harnett County. I don't do a whole lot of court in Lee County because I know so many people, but Harnett and Johnston, I've been doing domestic, and that's because a lot of our judges are coming from a criminal background. When I practiced law for 13 years in Sanford with my father, and I had a general practice where I did criminal, domestic, anything that you could think of, I did. And so our judges now, of the 11, I think we have maybe 4 who have had a domestic background. So probably for the last 10 to 12 years, probably half of the time I've been on the bench, I've been doing domestic court. And I kick myself because I wish when I started, I would have wrote down all these cases that I could write a book, because you just don't believe the things that you hear nowadays. And it's just unbelievable. And you just scratch your head and you look at your clerk and they're going like this. So if you want to hear some interesting tales, I urge you to come to domestic court, or any court. In criminal court, you hear some wild stories, but if you want to be entertained, please come to court. Love to see you in the courtroom, and be glad to talk to you if you do come to the courtroom. I'll be glad to answer any questions that anybody has. Yes, sir.
I will. In all your years, have you, and just tell me if you can't talk about it, but have you ever been able to loosely form any sort of correlation between the domestic cases that you see, especially involving children, and the family dynamic? And to expand on that a little bit, like Hal was just talking about, that the family structure is kind of the root of American exceptionalism. I've heard that said before, in that we were all in a state of being where a child or children were raised by a mom and a dad. And I don't know about this room, but I was raised by a single mom, and it was very hard. Have you seen in your time a common trend or trait that you can put your finger on and say, that's the problem? If we could fix this, I wouldn't see half the cases I see.
I will say this. I'll try to answer it like this. I've seen in the last 10 to 12 years more cases involving custody of children where the two parties have met online and have a whirlwind romance, I guess, and the next thing you know is they're getting married within 3 to 6 months. And you know, at one time, I think the legislature, and this was a long time ago, there was talk about trying to make it more difficult to get a divorce. In other words, right now, to get a divorce, you have to be separated for 12 months, continuously separated. Well, I thought they were working on the wrong end. I said, you know, if people come to that point, they don't want to be together. Why do we want to keep them together? And I know they, you know, to let them go to counseling and all that. But the way I look at it, we need to make it more difficult to get married on the front end. I tell people before, and Randy is one of my bailiffs here. He'll tell. I tell people all the time who tell me they're getting married. I say, well, you need to come sit in domestic court before you get married. And I think that ought to be a requirement before you get married. Is, you know, a lot of times if you get married by a preacher, obviously he's going to say, I'm not going to marry you unless you come sit with me and talk with me for 2 sessions or whatever. Well, I think that ought to make them come to domestic court and see what they're getting into. But I think, you know, it ought to be more difficult to get married now. People just, like I said, with this age now, you can meet people online. You know, back in my day, you had to get your driver's license and go meet somebody, to see anybody and talk to anybody. Now you just take your phone and you can talk with somebody you don't even know, and half the time what they put on the phone is not true, and so that's the problem. That's the problem we're running into. So.
Very well done. I mean, in today's day and age, we have everybody trying to marry everybody, and I'm surprised, you know, somebody hadn't tried to marry their dog. I'm sure they have. I mean, the COS llama's already asked for Miss White's hand in marriage. We told him no. You know, the COS llama. He wants to kiss you every time he sees you. Yeah. So, anyways, I fully agree with you. She did. I would have been concerned too. I know he does. But very good point, sir. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Any other questions? Thank you.